President Donald Trump wrote on Twitter, the idea that the BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy. They can go find another sucker. There is no chance that the BRICS will replace the US dollar in international trade, and any country that tries should wave goodbye to America. So, this is a threat to Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Iran, Egypt, what's it called? UAE. Who else is in part of the BRICS? UAE, Ethiopia. Ethiopia is also part of BRICS. He's basically threatening Saudi Arabia as well. He's threatening all of these countries and essentially telling them that they must use American dollars. And if they don't use American dollars when they're conducting bilateral trade, then he will punish them with sanctions. What Trump doesn't seem to understand is that the rest of the world is already getting sick of the American dollar anyways, and the world is already de-dollarizing as we speak, especially when Biden started to weaponize the dollar when Russia invaded Ukraine. He used heavy financial sanctions as well as secondary sanctions against any country that defied America. So, I forget the exact statistic, but it's like more than half of all the countries in the world are going through some sort of sanctions. And what that results in is that once you start sanctioning people left and right, they're going to come up with their own alternative method of payment, and they'll just sidestep you entirely. So, the issue that Trump doesn't seem to understand is that if Brazil wants to purchase goods from South Africa, or South Africa wants to purchase goods from Iran, or China wants to purchase goods from Russia, why would they need to use the US dollar? America is not involved whatsoever. They're not involved. So why is the American dollar the standard for for global trade? I understand this is how the world was since 1945, since 1944. It's always been like that. But countries are moving away from that. They're diversifying. They're not just using dollars and fiat currencies. They're also engaging in, a lot of people are returning to using gold. Also, you have cryptocurrencies. People are using that as well. So this idea that people are just beholden to Uncle Sam and that they must do whatever Uncle Sam says or else they're going to get crushing financial penalties, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And what this does, that it actually betrays Trump's understanding of the world, because he seems to understand is that he thinks that the consumers have all the power. He thinks that the American consumers who are consuming televisions and avocados, that they're the real strength of the global economy, that every other country is beholden to the American consumer. It doesn't actually work that way. Chinese, Russians, South Africans, Brazilians, they all want to consume too. They all want flat screen TVs too. They all can work and consume as well, right? So the reason why America was ahead of the rest of the world was because America was the most productive country in the world. They had the highest productivity. But now the U.S. productivity is still very high, but the reason why American productivity was very high was because they had lots of investment, internal investment as well as international investment. Now, for most of American history, they used to generate that investment internally, or they would get investment from British bankers in order to industrialize the United States. However, in recent decades, America is no longer a creditor nation. They're actually a debtor nation. And we have trillions of dollars of foreign investment actually entering the U.S. over the last decade or so. So, what the Americans don't seem to understand is that the rest of the world is actually supplying them with goods and services. How else are they supposed to get these cheap televisions and shoes if they're not actually producing as much as they consume? Obviously, the rest of the world is loaning them. Obviously, the rest of the world is buying American debt. Obviously, the rest of the world is accumulating American currency. And when you have foreigners in Africa and Asia, when they're accumulating American currency, when they're holding American dollars in safes, what do you think that's going to result in? It's going to result in America getting cheap or actually free goods and services. Because every single dollar that America has printed and that exists overseas is a claim on the resources of the United States. So if these foreigners are sitting on American cash, that's actually a good thing for the Americans, because now they don't actually have to produce whatever those dollars actually had a claim to, right? So if you have $100 bill, you are entitled to a certain amount of American goods and services, whether it's haircuts or avocados or whatever it is. So foreigners actually sitting on American reserves is actually a good thing. And if Trump actually gets away with what he's doing, a lot of foreigners are going to start dumping their dollars. They don't want to deal with dollars anymore. And that's not a pretty sight. It's not pretty for the Americans. The Americans are going to have a much reduced standard of living, and I don't see how they're going to turn themselves around from this. America's already having issues with their workforce. They have labor shortages. A lot of their employees are actually obese, or they have issues when it comes to behavior issues, or they have drug issues, and also the demographics aren't so great. Like you have the birth rate has been below replacement for about 30 years now. So they've been able to mind that gap with all the immigrants. But once you reduce immigration, which is what Mr. Trump actually wants to do, he's actually trying to reduce America's advantage over the rest of the world. So it's going to be very interesting to see. And if you actually look right here, Al Jazeera talked about it, BBC also talked about it, that Trump threatened 100% tariff on BRICS nations if they tried to replace the dollar. I'm telling you, this will only result in all of these countries moving away from the dollar entirely. That's exactly what's going to happen. So I'm welcoming it. I want to see what happens. It's going to be a very interesting 4 years.